All right, good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. Welcome, everyone, this morning. My name's Rudi Tartaglia. It's nice to see a couple of familiar faces in the audience. So a warm welcome to you wherever you are in Australia. I know I've invited some people from regional Queensland to attend today. So welcome if you're in Rockhampton, Gladstone, Emerald or Bundaberg, where I do a lot of work. And it would be remiss of me not to say hello to some of my students. I've got some students here that are skipping my regular class and joining me in class today. So I just want to give you a little bit of a background on myself. I really don't like talking about myself much, but just so you know who I am. So my background is primarily in strategic marketing. And over the last 10, 12 years, I've been working also as a business consultant and working with a lot of businesses to assist them to build their branding, their overall marketing strategy. And of course, I'm here on behalf of TAFE Queensland. I do a lot of work with TAFE Queensland in the regions, which is why I spoke about regional Queensland before, and working with some of their councils as part of their economic development programs to build scalable and sustainable businesses within regional Queensland. So I know I look very young, right? But I'm actually pretty old, and I've been around for a little while. And I remember when I first got into marketing, I won't say how long ago, but a little while ago, I was working with traditional tools such as, TV, radio, press, magazines, outdoor. And of course, I remember when, the first commercially used websites came into play in the early 90s. And so I've seen the genesis of digital marketing and really the journey that we're on today. And who knows where the digital journey is going to go in years to come. We could only imagine. But one thing I do know is that digital marketing is here to stay, and businesses really need to learn how to embrace it. And a huge part of marketing is actually the psychology that sits around consumer engagement. So I want to talk through some of those things today with you, and maybe possibly bust a few myths as well that people may have around digital marketing. And we have to remember that as business owners, as people in marketing, I'm sure there's a diverse background of people here today. We get so bogged down with the data and the analytics around digital marketing, we tend to forget that there's a human element to it. There's a human on the other side of the computer screen. There's a human clicking the mouse. There's a human being making the decision on their brand preferences. And so that's really what this session is about. It's called Thoughts on the Digital Brain. And so we're looking at the psychological elements around how people make purchasing decisions. And as small to medium businesses or larger businesses, any business really, how do we tap into that, and how do we alter some of the marketing that we're doing to make sure that we're engaging with the psychology of our customer segments? So again, welcome, and that's what this session is about today. So the discussion topics we're going to look at are the relevance of branding in the digital journey and how we can utilize branding instead of call to action marketing to engage an emotional response. And just before I get too further into this presentation, there is a button at the top of your slide which you can create a full screen, just in case there's some information on the presentation slides that you want to see and you don't want to squint. You can turn that into a full screen. And also wanted to mention that as far as the Q&A, there's a Q&A button within you'll see within your screen. And so if you've got any questions as we go through, just please post those in the Q&A chat area. And at the end of the presentation, I'll address, don't know if I'll address all of the questions depending on time, but I'll try to address as many questions as I can. So we've got the relevance of branding, the purchasing funnels and how they apply to marketing. So we're going to look at the 3 types of purchasing funnels that we generally use in marketing and how we can utilize those and adapt our marketing to tap into the psychology of where people are at each of those funnel stages. Often there's talk about the importance of client acquisition and business growth, and those things are extremely important, but I want to spend a little bit of time talking about how we can utilize digital strategy to retain customers. And obviously retention brings in predictability and an overall strength to our business and our revenue. So I want to talk about how we can utilize digital strategy to do that. I'm also going to run through nudge theory. So how we can use nudges, little nudges to build probability into the customer decision to hopefully increase the likelihood of that decision moving in our favour. We don't like the word manipulation. Let's stick to nudge theory, and I'll explain how we can utilise that. Going to have a look at framing and the concept of framing in digital marketing. Framing is a relatively new concept, but it's starting to be brought into not only digital marketing, but all aspects of marketing as well. And I also want to touch on the tie in between business strategy and digital execution, and how we need to make sure that whatever we do in the digital environment is in congruence or in direct correlation with our overall business objectives. So I have a question for you to start this off. How many rational decisions do you make when it comes to purchasing a product or service? I mean, we're all rational, aren't we? You know, if we weren't rational, how would we possibly make it through the day? Well, I want to propose a slightly different scenario to you. And this relates to marketing, because like I said in the beginning, we don't pay with our wallets. We don't pay with clicking on our mouse. That's how we manifest our thoughts. And so we need to get back to thinking about the psychology. And I'm going to throw a little bit of a spanner in the works and show you how we're not as rational as what we may think we are when it comes to purchasing products and services. Now, for the younger generation here, you're going to think, what is this? But for the older generation here, you'll know that this is probably the coolest video game ever created, Pac-Man. And yeah, I'm a bit of a video game nerd, but I'm using Pac-Man as a way to share with you a point around the difference between logic and emotion. Now, when we make purchases, we tend to think we're like Mr. Pac-Man. He's Pac-Man, but I call him Mr. Pac-Man out of respect. We tend to think like we're Mr. Pac-Man because we make logical, rational, easy decisions. We make decisions that we believe are the most convenient. So we purchase our products and services a bit like, well, we believe we purchase our products and services a bit like Mr. Pac-Man is chomping on the pellets. And so when we ask or research customers about why they buy our products and services, we tend to get answers like affordable, functional, convenient. But that's what we're thinking about on a conscious level. There's actually more going on, which I want to talk through. So when it comes to logic, we believe this is what we believe we do. We believe we digest information to arrive at a logical conclusion. We believe that logical conclusion must be right because, well, we came up with it. So how could it be wrong? And we justify the purchase through reason and rationale. That's what we believe is going on when we're looking at our purchases. So I want to share with you a study that a gentleman called Professor Gerald Zaltman, he's a Harvard professor, and he authored a book called Marketing Metaphoria, which looks at how the subconscious mind plays a role in our purchasing decisions. And his study showed that, well, one of his many studies showed that 95% of our purchasing decisions take place in the subconscious mind. Now, for businesses that are marketing, which is many businesses, I'd have to say most businesses market to the logical mind. So most businesses market to the 5%. Whereas what's really going on is the 95%, because the subconscious mind is largely ruled by emotions. So if we're marketing to logic, yet people are making decisions based on emotion, we've got a problem. And so I'm here to talk through that problem to see how we can alleviate some of those issues. So here you'll see some brands in front of you, and this is a interesting study that I just want to share with you. This might freak some of you out, but academics behind a Dutch study found that by the age of 2, children knew the symbols of between 8 and 12 brands on average. That's scary. Now, they didn't know what the brands necessarily did, but they could recognize the brands. And what happens over time is that these brands, and if I pick on, say, 3 brands within the group of brands that you can see in front of you, if I pick some legacy historical brands such as McDonald's, Nike, and Coca-Cola, these brands become bigger than the brands themselves over time, especially the brands that we grow up with. And over time, because of the longevity, they feel like almost old trusted friends that we know and love. And so there's a saying in branding, the more we see a brand, the less we question it. And this is the power of branding from an emotional standpoint, and building that bridge between our values and the emotions that we want to put out in the marketplace, and the perceptions that our consumers have over our brand or about our brand. Now, you're going to think I'm a bit of a nerd because I've had Pac-Man, now I'm showing Darth Vader, but again, Darth Vader is a cool character from Star Wars. And I've picked Darth Vader to highlight a story around how emotion actually works in the buying process. So I remember being very young and walking down a toy aisle with my mother. And as soon as I would get to the Star Wars figures, I mean, I would go nuts. You know, I would not leave. I would throw a tantrum. There was an emotional thing that was happening with me towards the brand. I felt giddy. I couldn't look away from these action figures. And I literally felt like if my mother didn't buy me a Star Wars figure, you know, the world was going to end. Now, was this logical? No, it wasn't. It was completely irrational, and it was completely emotional. Now, the interesting thing is that from a functional standpoint, I had no reason for not choosing another toy in that aisle, because functionally, what I was going to do is take that toy, take it home, put it in a scenario where, do the play that we do as children, it probably, the environment I was going to use the toy in had nothing to do with out of space. It was just a figure that I could use to play with other toys, as you do when you're very young. But because of the movie Star Wars were successful at creating a frame, and I'll talk about framing a little bit later, a frame in the mind, so that the brand and the Star Wars brand itself became much bigger than the movie. And so if everyone here saw Star Wars, the movie, we won't get into the prequels. That's another, we could spend a whole day on that. But the original movie was enormous, and all these brands, all these products and services came out of that brand. And so the emotional connection I had was not logical, it was purely emotional, because I wanted to become part of that brand in some way, as did many kids. So Star Wars were able to build a collective beliefs, which was fantastic for kids, but probably annoyed the parents, as it did my mother, whereas nothing else would do. It had to be that Star Wars figure. And that's the power of framing. And so for all of you, everyone that saw the movie, you'll know that Darth Vader didn't say, "You have annoyed me for the last time." That was my mother. That's why I put that up there. My mother used to say that, "You have annoyed me for the last time." But I would never let it go until, I sound like a terrible child, don't I? But I would never let it go until I got that Star Wars figure. And so I tell you this story because it highlights the impact that brands can have on our emotional psychology. So what does this tell us? It tells us that emotions connect us with all purchases. We believe that we justify our purchase with reason. What we actually do is justify our emotion with a purchase. So it's the opposite to what we feel is going on in the logical sense. I want to give you a more modern viewpoint of this. And this is looking at logic and emotion in the purchasing of clothing. So the shirt on the left-hand side, you'll see I've put up as a logical choice. And the shirt on the right-hand side, I've put up as the emotional choice. So from a functional standpoint, the shirt on the left is more than adequate, looking purely at a functional standpoint, because it looks exactly the same. But there's something else going on within this shirt, and you've got good eyesight, you'll probably see what's going on. This emblem. So this emblem, or this logo or trademark or brand, is for Ralph Lauren Polo. Now, logically, I would want to buy the first shirt, wouldn't I? Because it's doing the same function as the second shirt. But based on the values that Ralph Lauren has been able to market, the rhetoric that sits around the framing of the Ralph Lauren brand, something happens to me when I see that brand name. It starts to bring about a lot of trigger words because of the successful framing that the branding has done. And some of those words are opulence, success, trendy. If I wear the shirt, I've made it. I'm cool, rich, and I've got a opulent lifestyle or a lavish lifestyle. Now, is that true from everyone that's wearing that shirt? Probably not. But in branding, there is no reality, there's only perception. So this brand has been successful in building a psychology in the marketplace that is based around the words that you see. So when I'm buying that shirt, I'm not just buying a shirt, I'm buying the values that sit around that shirt. Now, the disparity in price, on average, of course, I might be able to get the first shirt for $20, $30. The second shirt, the Ralph Lauren shirt, I may be paying $90 to $120 for that same shirt. So what that means is I'm happy to pay the extra because of what that brand actually represents in my mind and what that brand shows other people about who I am. And this is the power of branding. I'll show you another example. Sorry to make you all hungry, but there's a couple of burgers here. So I've got a local burger shop burger on the left-hand side, and I've got a grilled burger on the right-hand side. Now, again, from a functional standpoint, it's food. It's serving a purpose. Logically, it would make sense for me to buy the local burger because it's probably going to be, well, it is going to be, certainly in my area, unless you're at an airport, it might be more expensive, but in my area, it's a lot lower in price than a grilled burger. But let's talk through some of the reasons why that could be so. And again, it's branding. So grilled has been extremely successful at owning the following words in the marketplace. They're tasty. Now, tasty is subjective, but that's how they portray their burgers. Trusted brand, so I know what I'm going to get. It's consistent, and so consistency becomes part of the brand value. And McDonald's have been very successful in this as well. So I've had a McDonald's here and I've had a McDonald's in France, and they're both, I couldn't taste the difference anyway. And so you're paying for that consistency and you're happy to spend extra money on that consistency. They also spruik healthy. Now, I haven't studied nutrition or health, so I don't know if they're a healthy burger, but I feel less guilty eating a grilled burger than I do other burgers. Again, it's perception. Systems. There's systems around the hygiene and the way the food is made as well, which becomes part of the branding, like McDonald's have done. And they also spruik about family and togetherness within their advertising. So it's the same food group, but a different set of values that applies. And so from a logical standpoint, I could go to my local burger store and pay $6, $7 for a hamburger, roughly. Or I can go to grilled and I can pay probably starting at $11, $12, and depending how extravagant you want your hamburger, it could be maybe $16, $17. So I'm paying more because I see value in the brand that I'm engaging with. That's my point. Our whole economic system is based on value. And so if businesses are focusing on that 5%, that logic, they're missing out on a huge opportunity to increase revenues, increase costs, which are associated directly with value. So when I consult to businesses and they say, I want to make more money, I say, well, how do we create more value? Because when people say, I can't afford your products or services, what they're really saying, if we look at the psychology around what they're saying, is, I don't see the value. And so as businesses, as marketers, we need to find a way to tap into or to create that value for our consumers. And branding is an extremely effective way of steering the conversation away from price and moving it to one of value. So let's have a look at this wine experiment, which is an interesting wine experiment. So Caltech pitted 5 bottles of wine against each other. Obviously, Caltech's the university in America. They ranged in price from $5 to $90. Similarly, the experimenters put cheap wine in the expensive bottles, but this time they put the tasters in a brain scanner. So while tasting the wine, the same part of the brain would light up in the machine every time, but with the wine the tasters thought was expensive, one particular region of the brain became more active. So it actually had a clear impact on the brain through the taste. Another study had tasters rate cheese eaten with 2 different wines. One they were told was California, which is well known for expensive wine, the other from North Dakota. The same wine was in both bottles. The tasters rated the cheese they ate with the California wine as being better quality, and they ate more of it. So what does this study tell us? It tells us that the brain can adjust the taste based on an existing bias towards a belief system. So that's extremely powerful stuff for marketers to know. And it's not just about this one experiment. This has been done on countless occasions through different neuromarketing studies, which is the study of how we buy from a psychological standpoint, on how taste can change depending on our internal belief system. It's really interesting. So what does this mean to digital marketing? Because we're here to talk about thoughts on the digital brain, aren't we? We need to focus on branding and not just call to action marketing. Because branding focuses on the emotional side, it builds that emotional connection with ourselves and our consumers, which means we're now tapping into the 95% of where the decisions are being made. Branding is a marathon, it's not a sprint, which is why most businesses tend to not understand the value of it, because it does take time. However, a brand will outlast a product. So we can come up with different products and put them out in the marketplace, but we're primarily working on transactional based relationships. Once we build trust and equity in a brand, we can then use that to underpin countless amounts of products and services, as long as it fits within our core brand position. So there's more opportunities through the building of brand awareness. So we need to think about the values that we can showcase in our communication. We need to know our positioning statement. Our positioning statement is our tagline. It's the reason why we do what we do. It's the why, not the how and the what, but the why, to use a Simon Sinek analogy. We need to sell our story, and our story comes from the why, from our positioning statement. Stories provide context and they create trust and value. So have a think about your own story of your business. Have a think about the communication you've been putting out there. Has it been based around logic or transactional type elements, or is it based around value and emotional type elements? So let me pose another question to you. Have you ever been sold something or been attempted to sell something before you're ready to buy? We probably all have. And I want to talk through the benefits of using funnels within the digital environment. So what are funnels? A digital marketing funnel is a framework that is used website traffic and nurture that traffic until they become customers. A typical marketing sales funnel has 3 stages: awareness, consideration, and conversion, or some people call that decision, conversion or decision. Now, the awareness phase is important because most businesses only know about us when they know about us. And the way that we get businesses to know about us is by creating awareness in the marketplace. And in the awareness phase, we're looking at providing high value content so that it's not so much about our brand, it's about the value or the unique selling proposition that we bring to people in that part of the funnel. Consideration phase is the second part of the funnel. So that's the part where we actually showcase the options that we have within our business or our brand to execute the value that we spoke about within the awareness phase. So consideration, we're going to be looking at not only what we provide, but what we may provide in relation to both our direct and indirect competitors. And then we also, in the third stage of the funnel, we look at our conversion or decision phase. And the reason why we take people through this funnel is because we have to start meeting our consumers' psychology where they're at in that moment. And what the mistake a lot of businesses make is they choose to sell a decision phase to an awareness phase. And it becomes ineffectual because why are we trying to sell people into making a decision about our business when they don't have a clue about what our business is, what our brand stands for, and the value that we actually provide to the marketplace? And so I want you to think about your own business and your own marketing and to see how you're approaching those 3 stages of the funnel: the awareness, consideration, and conversion, or we can also call them top of funnel, middle of funnel, or bottom of funnel. So what do we know? Well, let's have a look at an interesting study. So Chet Holmes, in his book, The Ultimate Sales Machine, published a buyer pyramid, which suggested at any one time, only 3% of your target audience will be ready to buy. And so Chet developed a breakdown of buyers, looking at the following 5 areas and categories, percentages. So his study showed 3% of people are interested in buying right now. 6 to 7% of people are open to considering such a purchase. So there's some interest there, but they're not quite ready at that moment. 30% of people are not thinking about it at this time. 30% of people don't believe they are interested based on the information they have at that time. And 30% of people are definitely not interested. Now, let's just cull number 5 for a moment, because those people are not going to be interested in what it is we do. And number 3 and 4, we'll get to over time, because hopefully if we've got frequent marketing and branding, as consumers move through their own life cycle, their own journey, and as there might be a change in demography, psychographics, or geographics, they may end up becoming part of 1 and 2. But I just want to focus on 1 and 2 at the moment. So 3% of people that are interested in buying right now, and then the 6 to 7% that are open to considering such a purchase. Now, businesses, or most businesses, make the mistake of just focusing on the 3%. So if they're not interested today, we don't want to talk to them. If I spend, $1,000 on marketing today, I only want to look at the return on investment I'm getting back at the end of the week. So I've spent 1,000, what am I making? You know, how many of those people have actually purchased something within a few days of that advertising going out? But again, it doesn't work that way. And in the end, it doesn't really matter what we think. It matters what the psychology of the market says, what the way that they act. And so this is a law because it's the ways that the brain is wired. I may not believe in gravity, but if I walk outside my home and jump off the veranda, I'm going to hit the ground. Even though I might believe that gravity doesn't exist, the laws tell me differently. And we use the funnels in the digital marketing context as a way to tap into those different psychologies that people are going through their individual customer journey. And so when we look at the awareness, consideration, and decision phases, we have to remember that only 3% are going to make a decision at that time. But we can use lead nurturing, which I'll talk about some strategies around that, to tap into the other 7% of people that are interested but not wanting to do anything at the moment. Now, I've got a very good friend of mine who has a very unique business. He sells information to musicians that want to have their music in films and movies. So he's got producers and people like that that buy music for films, primarily in America. And he sells that data to musicians and managers and record labels. And he was telling me not so long ago that 70 to 80% of his sales are done once they've come through the awareness, consideration, and decision funnel. So he's got different strategies set up, which are automated using drip automation on email. So only 20 to 30% of his sales happen at the point of people seeing the first, in the awareness phase, the first point of contact, and then making a purchase. So think about that from a revenue, if we pull aside or put aside the percentages. From a revenue standpoint, think about the large amount of revenue he would be losing if he wasn't nurturing those leads and taking them through the funnel process, top of funnel, middle of funnel, and bottom of funnel. Now, one of the benefits of building a brand over time is that once we build strong brand awareness, brand equity, brand trust, whatever you want to call that, once we build that adequately in the marketplace, we can by default bypass the two funnel areas. We automatically bypass awareness and consideration because consumers no longer have to make a choice about the value that we provide or who we are. So they can go straight to the decision part of the funnel. And ultimately, that's why we engage in emotional or psychological branding, because we're trying to fast track the process of people thinking on the mind shelf about a problem they have and looking at the solutions that they have that sit in our brain that are going to solve that problem for us in that moment. So an example of that is if I go to my fridge and go to open the fridge and turn it on and get a drink out, and the light doesn't come on, my brain starts probably going into a panic because I'm thinking about all the food I'm going to lose. But after that, I'm going to be thinking about solutions, and I'm going to be thinking, can I get someone to repair it? Probably not. It's probably going to be more cost effective to go and purchase a new fridge. And automatically, my brain is wired to start looking for brands that are going to solve that problem. Now, if my brand isn't in the category, or if I don't think about that brand, then I'm invisible. My brand is invisible. So the holy grail of branding is to be aligned to the category associated with the problem that the person is facing. And if we can do that successfully, we then cut out those top two funnels. So in the fridge example, I might start thinking about Harvey Norman, The Good Guys, maybe JB Hi-Fi. I think they sell fridges. But I might have 2 or 3 brands that automatically come to mind that can solve that problem. So I may not even go to search for that product category. I'm going to hop in my car the next day. I'm going to go to those 3 places and I'm going to start to look at some options. And everyone else is invisible. If you're those 3 brands, that's terrific. But if you're not, that's a problem. And so branding is a way, again, of building that value in the mind of a consumer. So what does this all mean for digital marketing? Well, we need to understand the journeys. We need to meet our consumers where they're at. We need to take a strategic approach to the selling process. Just because someone doesn't want to buy right now doesn't mean that we should ignore them. We need to utilize marketing strategy to talk at each funnel stage. So we're providing different information at awareness, different information at consideration, and different information at the decision phase. We need to measure and monitor to see the conversion rates at each funnel stage, a bit like what my friend did, where he's measuring each area and then coming to the realization with this experiment that 70 to 80% of his sales are happening only when they come through the entire 3 funnel journey. Understand that not everyone will buy now. And if you disregard the buyer journey, you will ultimately miss out on future revenue. And that 8-9% could be a little bit more. That could be significant revenue into your business over time. We need to make it convenient for the 3%. So that's a bit of a no-brainer, but we need to make sure that the navigation on our website is usable, is functional. It takes people through a clear roadmap of how they can purchase our products and services with limited or little to no resistance. And then we need to nurture the 7%. Okay, so we need to find ways of getting people into our customer funnel journey. Email marketing is a great way of doing that. That's sort of the logical way. And we can use other areas of digital marketing like remarketing, where we can have lookalike audiences in Facebook or remarket to people that have gone to specific parts of our website. We can do that on most social media applications now, and certainly we can do that through Google Ads. So hopefully I'm not going too quick for you, but please, if you've got any questions, put them in the Q&A and I will get to those at the end. So let's talk about retention strategy in digital. And a lot of hype, a lot of marketing to businesses is around business growth and acquisition. But I want to talk about the benefit of actually making sure that we keep what we have as far as customer retention and how we can utilize digital marketing for that. Remember, customer retention is a way for us to build stability in our business and predictability within our business model. And so there's a few reasons why customers do leave our business, and I want to run through what some of those are now. It could be that they no longer require our product or service. They might find a cheaper competitor. They're not happy with our product, or they didn't like the way they were treated. So it could be any number of these reasons. And there's always going to be attrition, okay, but we need to try and utilize digital where we can to cut down on the amount of attrition, and of course use digital to increase retention where we can. So what can we do then from a digital standpoint as far as retention strategies? We have to recognize there's always going to be natural attrition. We're never going to keep 100% of our client base. So we shouldn't be down about losing customers, but we obviously want to limit that as much as we can. The need for our product and service will shift over time, and that will shift based on those three areas that I gave you before: demographic, who they are, psychography or psychographic, what they think and feel, their opinions as they shift through their life journey, and their geography, where they live. So if someone moves to another suburb, then, you know, and we've got a retail store or a food shop, then of course the attrition rate is going to happen just organically. Here's some things we can do though. We can focus on branding to create loyalty as opposed to price. Okay, so people will leave our business because of price if we've built a transactional relationship with those consumers. If we built a relationship based on loyalty and value, it's harder for them to leave, and it creates a competitor advantage for our brand. Let's utilize email marketing to stay on the mind shelf. Now, email marketing tends to be one of those things that businesses might do for a short period of time and then forget it. But like everything in marketing, it's about frequency. So if we say we're going to do a monthly newsletter, let's stick to it. Let's find resources to do that. Because what we're doing is we're providing value. Hopefully we're providing value in that e-newsletter. But we're blocking out competitors because we're staying on the mind shelf. If we've got consumers on that email list that are using our business, our service regularly, it gives them more reason or rationale not to leave our business. And hopefully if we're adding enough value, that will then just reiterate the reason why that person is doing business with us in the first place. But it needs to be consistent. We can use the Pareto analysis to reward the top 20%. So for those of you that know what the Pareto analysis is, it was developed by Pareto, an Italian mathematician. And he looked at wealth distribution and how wealth was distributed between the rich and the poor, and that 20% of 80% of the land was owned by 20% of the people. Now that theory is being used in everything, really. It's being used in economics, in microeconomics, in marketing, in product defects, project management, whole series of different areas within business. But in this context, if we know that 80% of our revenue is coming out of 20% of our client base, we better find out who that 20% is and what they like and what their demography is and their psychography and their geography, you know, where they live, what they think, who they are. And let's make sure that they feel loved up to the point where they don't want to leave. Now, that's not saying that we shouldn't care about the 80%. Of course, we need to care about the 80% because they're generating revenue in our business. But if we know that majority of our revenue is coming out of that smaller percentage, we need to look at strategies of keeping them in the fold. So we should be utilizing messenger apps, which there's quite a few. You know, there's Messenger and WhatsApp, Snapchat, and of course they may change depending on the demographic that our consumers fall into. But that's a really good way of, again, blocking out competitors and fast tracking responses back to our client base. We're all pretty fickle now. Like if we don't get a response within a New York minute, we're gone. I'm not saying that's right. I'm not going to judge that, but that's the way it is. So if we can set up those tools and resource those tools where we can build a quicker line between what our clients want and what we can provide, that's only going to play better for us longer term as part of our retention. We also need to look at breaking down our messages into target groups so that communication is more relevant. You know, we know that marketing relies on frequency and relevancy. And so the more relevant we make our messages, the better the better our retention strategy is going to be overall, because we can break our customers into groups and make the value that we provide to each of those groups more relevant. So we're not providing the same value to everyone. We might be providing a different value to 18 to 24-year-olds than we are to 49 to 60-year-olds, or between men and women, or different cultures, or whichever way we decide to break up our market segments or our target markets. We can be providing things that are just relevant to that particular cohort. Now I want to talk about nudge theory. I don't know how many of you have heard of nudge theory. If you have, I'd love for you to mention it in the chat box to see if you've heard of nudge theory. It's a relatively new concept. It was developed largely in 2008 by an economist called Rudi Tartaglia, and so he came up with nudge theory as a way of making it easier, or increasing the likelihood of a decision being made. So nudge theory is, again, not manipulating people, it's setting up an environment so that the probability is going to be more skewed towards the business or the brand that's setting up that environment. So let's have a look at nudge theory and what it is. And again, I'm sharing this information because these are things, this isn't just a theory that can be used by Apple or Coca-Cola. These theories are things that we can bring into our small to medium enterprises, and they're extremely powerful because they work on the psychology of how people. So nudge theory is based upon the idea that by shaping the environment, also known as choice architecture, we can influence the likelihood that one option is chosen over another by individuals. A key factor of nudge theory is the ability for an individual to maintain freedom of choice and to feel in control of the decisions that they make. An example of this, of nudge theory, and I'll show you a couple of examples later on, but one that comes to mind is what McDonald's were trying to do with having their consumers to make healthier choices. And so they wanted consumers to make healthier choices on drinks, on soft drinks. And so they utilized their touchscreen technology. And when they looked at the choices that people were making, they saw that the middle of the board, any products or services they had in the middle of the board were more commonly chosen. So what they did is they changed the middle of the board to include soft drinks that were sugar-free. So instead of it being the full sugar Coke, or the whatever they call it, the full of sugar Coke, or the regular Coke we'll call it, they replaced that with Zero Coke, or Coke Zero, I think it's called. And something interesting happened when they did that. And this is a nudge. This is what we call a nudge in nudge theory. The level of sales of soft drinks did not change. However, like McDonald's predicted, the sales of the sugar-free Coke enhanced. It went up because it was a convenient choice at that particular time when they were choosing the other options. And so that is an example of what nudge theory is. It's setting up the probability so that there's a higher likelihood of one decision being made over other decisions. So nudge theory can be utilized in digital marketing to increase the probability of a consumer choosing something that we want them to. And here's a wine example that I wanted to share with you. So an American bottle shop chain used an element of nudge theory called anchoring. Okay, and they used that to anchor two different price points against each other. And so they started a little bit of research to see how they could increase wine sales. So they started with a $10 bottle of wine being anchored against a $30 bottle of wine. And so what they found, and when I'm talking about anchoring here, I'm talking about on the shelf. So anchoring $10 versus a $30 bottle of wine. And what they found was 70 to 80% of the sales that happened using this theory happened with the $10 bottle of wine. And they wanted to find out why this was happening, not only why this was happening, but also to see what would happen if they brought in a third anchor to benchmark against a lower and a higher price. And something amazing happened. They brought in a $20 bottle of wine. And we call this the power of three, but this is used in anchoring. And the reason why this works extremely well is because now in the psychology, we've got benchmark. We know what low is, we know what mid-range is, and we know what high range is. Now, they doubled their wine sales because, with this particular brand, because people started to choose the $20 bottle of wine over the $10 bottle of wine. Now, why is this so? Well, people didn't want to buy the cheapest bottle. They also couldn't justify buying the more expensive bottle unless there was a specific reason why they were buying it. But now it seemed like a predictable choice and a reasonable choice to choose the $20 bottle of wine because it was anchored against two other price points that made sense. And so they went and researched people, and as consumers were coming in and were asking them questions. And, you know, for instance, little things like if someone was taking their significant other to the bottle shop, they didn't want to be seen as cheap. So they didn't want to buy the $10 bottle of wine, nor could they justify the extra expense. So the 20 sat well from a psychological standpoint. So this is an element of nudge theory. And if you have a look at a lot of software companies now are using anchoring, the power of three. They'll have a bronze, a silver, and a gold. Sometimes they call them that, or they'll call them different packages. Knowing true well that the majority of people are going to take the middle one. So it works from a psychological standpoint, and we can use this in our own productizing. The way that we frame and display our products can be powerful from a pricing standpoint. So have a think about how you might be able to bring anchoring in to your own business. I want to share a couple of other examples of nudge. New York City cabs increased tips by 144 million in revenue by adding set percentages. So in the past, what they would do is they would ask consumers, would you like to provide a tip? What tip would you like to give? By changing that to set amounts, it made it easy for the consumer, and it nudged people into making a set choice because there was no other option. So they could choose the 20, the 25, or 30%. So that in it alone drove more revenue. Another example is what De Beers did, who really own the industry of diamond trading. But they set a benchmark and were successful in branding and changing the rhetoric around the amount of money people would spend on diamond rings. And they set a benchmark or a nudge of a 2-month salary. That is what you should be spending if you love that person. It's horrible, isn't it? But ultimately, that's what they were saying. If you love that person, you'll spend 2 months' salary. And they were very successful in bringing that rhetoric into manifestation. And so diamond ring sales increased from 5% to 89%. And there's countless stories of where nudge theory has assisted businesses to increase the likelihood of something happening. So again, any questions you have around that, please put that in the Q&A, and I'll get to that. I'll get to that at the end. I want to move on to framing, and framing in the context of digital. So what is framing? So how do you know? I'll ask you a question. When you walk into an art gallery and you see a piece of artwork on the wall, a bit like the one behind me, that lovely bit of artwork, how do you know what that means? How do you determine what's going on in that with that piece of art? Well, you're making a judgment on the 4 corners of that frame and everything that's going on within that piece of artwork. And so you walk into a gallery, you start walking towards the artwork that you like, and your brain starts going through all these different factors of what's actually happening within that. What's the symbology in the piece of art? What are the colors? Are there people in there? Are they happy? Are they sad? Are they doing something? And so you're making a judgment on whether that piece of art is a good piece of art. Are they happy? You're building a story essentially based on everything that's going in the foreground, in the background of that piece of art. And that's what framing is. So we take that same principle and we use that in marketing. And that can be used both in traditional marketing and also in digital marketing as well. So again, you're looking at the symbols and you're looking at the context of that artwork or that piece of content we would call in digital marketing to make a determination on everything that's happening. And I'll run through a couple of examples of how we can use that and maybe how you can start to frame your content for your digital or your advertising that is going to draw more of an emotional connection between the consumer and your product or service and your brand. And this term framing applies to marketing because we can use framing techniques to build stories, to showcase different values, different symbology that we want to bring in, or semiotics that we want to bring into our overall branding, to evoke an emotion or a thought or a perception in the mind of our consumers. So everything we do within a digital landscape signals something to our marketplace. Everything we say, the colours we use, the talent we use in imagery, the people we use, how they're dressed, all of those things are being judged on a subconscious level by our consumers. And so by using framing techniques, we actually look at everything that's going on within our content and our marketing to make sure that it's in alignment with our values and with the perception that we're trying to create in the mind of our consumers. The way we signal and frame differentiates us in a marketplace. And I'll show you an example or a couple of examples of that in a moment. And when we talk about framing, one of the areas of study that comes up is called semiotics in the signs and symbols. And my master's is actually in political communication. And so political communication is largely about psychology, not political science, but political communication now. Whereas political science is about policy and understanding all that, political communication is around branding, personal branding, framing, psychology, anchoring, nudging, all of those things that allow us to create a perception in the mind of the people that we're voting for. And semiotics or signs and symbols is another way of us doing that. And having, for instance, politicians talking with an Australian flag in the back is semiotics. It's drawing a connection between ourselves and our love for our country by using a symbol. So here's an example of image. Okay, and this came from, this is obviously Barack Obama. For those of you who don't know who it is, I'm sure you all know who it is. And this is seemingly a natural image, so caught in a very natural way. However, there is framing strategy that's going on in this image. And when I talk you through this, I want you to think about your own content that you're developing and how you can bring framing into that. So these are some of the things that are going on from a strategic standpoint that he and his team, I should say, were putting forward at the time of his campaign, which was in 2008. So you'll notice the soles of his shoes are worn, and this indicates hard work, strong work ethic. He's not a paper pusher, so he's out there getting things done. Okay, that's framing. Feet on the desk indicate relaxed. I got this. Smiling indicating that he's personable. So although you would think this is a natural image and it looks extremely natural, and that's the power of good framing, is that they're set up to look very natural. This is actually a clear strategy to build perceptions in the minds of the voter. Interestingly enough, his opposition at the time, John McCain, was not doing any of this. In fact, his digital marketing was, and I know that was relatively young in the digital marketing, but Barack Obama's team used digital marketing extremely well to frame and to build brand recognition at the time. And so here you had someone who was quite sterile, who never smiled much, and was more formal approach, and you had a clear opposition leader in Barack Obama who showed that he had a strong work ethic, really relaxed, personable, bit like, you know, more of the you and I, felt like one of the people that you were voting for. And I'm certainly not saying that this picture was the only reason he got elected. I mean, there's other things going on, but all of these things play a role in the connectivity between the brand and the psychology of the marketplace. And again, we all have that power to bring some of those elements into what we're doing, not only from a business branding standpoint, but from a personal branding standpoint as well. Let me show you an example of framing in advertising. So this is a ketchup ad for Heinz. And again, it seems just like a normal ad, but there's framing strategy going on. The red background is a well-known color to increase appetite. So that's where the red background comes from. The bottle is cut up into little slices to look like a tomato, okay, which then frames the word or the triggers freshness or good for me or health. The bottle looks like a sculpture, so that's indicating modern. So it's bringing the Heinz brand into and showing that it's an up-to-date contemporary brand and also innovative. And the word they use, grows, indicates that it's from farm to you, even though it's a factory-made condiment. So all of these things allow the brain to build a story around what this brand actually does. Now, this could be any digital ad. This could be a Facebook post. This could be, anything that we're doing as far as the development of content. And so what seemingly is just a standard advertising has had some really great strategy applied to it, which then allows the consumers to build a story around the value that sits within this brand. So they're getting tomato in a bottle, which is what they're really getting is a factory-made condiment. So again, I say this every time, but any questions, please put that in the Q&A area. I want to run through the tie between business strategy and digital strategy. And this is very important because a lot of times businesses are out there developing digital strategy and it's not actually aligned to what the business is trying to achieve. So we have to remember that marketing is there to play a functional role in the manifestation of what the business objectives are. And here's a little visual which may help you. So we start with our business strategy. We develop our SWOT, our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We develop our marketing objectives. We develop our digital objectives, or digital marketing objectives, and then we implement all of those objectives. Now, a lot of times what businesses do is they're out there working in silos. So they might have a business plan sitting over here. They might have some marketing objectives they're running here, and they might be running some social media ads or some digital marketing content over here. And never the twain shall meet. The three don't tend to talk to each other. And so what I want to leave you with today or charge you with is having a look at your own business strategy and making sure there's a clear line of correlation between the marketing objectives and the business strategy, and then the digital marketing objectives and the marketing objectives themselves. So they should all be singing from the same song sheet. We shouldn't have business strategy doing one thing, our marketing objectives doing another thing, and our digital doing something else. So what we're talking about in social media, the ads that we're putting up, their posts, should be a reflection of the objectives of the marketing. And then the marketing, of course, should be a reflection of the objectives of the business strategy. So if you're not doing that, please take some time and think about strategically why you're doing what you're doing in digital, and clustered with an analysis of the psychology of the marketplace, you're going to have a very powerful and robust marketing machine happening. So knowing all this and coming to the end of the presentation, how should we approach digital now that we know all this information? Well, firstly, we should understand our target markets. We should know who our target markets are and understand their segment needs. We should utilize data and analytics to help solve the problem and make informed decisions. Everything that I've spoken about, from the funnels, from the strategy, from nudge theory, anchoring, in the digital space, all of those things leave footprints, they leave clues. And so by understanding data, we can look at those clues and consistently tweak what we're doing in the digital landscape to increase the probability of a favorable event for our business or our brand. We need to leverage branding to compete. So let's not just think about those hard-nosed call to action marketing and communication tactics. Let's think about the overall branding that we're taking to the marketplace. What's the emotion that we're leaving with our consumers? And how do we evoke or how do we portray those values throughout the digital environment? We need to engage, so we need to use social media to connect and talk about our brand values and engage with people. We have to remember that social media is social. So if we're just out there pushing content and we're not engaging or talking to people, we're missing out on a huge opportunity. And really the purpose of what social is that two-way engagement. It's something that no other marketing communication vehicle will give us. Remember that sales are important, however, branding is the long game. So by building a brand over time, we're building brand equity and trust. We're building something that's sellable, that's trademarkable, if that's a word, and we're building that overall value system into our business. And we also need to think about the metrics. So I haven't spoken much about the metrics because I've been speaking primarily about the psychology. But everything we do in marketing, in digital, is essentially a design of experiments. You know, when we look at Six Sigma and project management and manufacturing, we're always looking at design of experiments. What variables can we look at independently to see what impact or causation they have on other things? We can do that, you know, with tools like Google Analytics and the social media insights we have and all those other software tools that allow us to draw data. We can set benchmarks. We can look at our own key performance indicators. We can look at industry KPIs, measure against those KPIs. Looking at all those things allows us to continually improve what we're doing in our business. So look, that brings me to the end of the presentation. I know I've been talking for a little while. Firstly, I'd like to thank everyone for taking their time out. I know everyone's busy, taking their time out and listening to me this morning, as well as my students and hopefully some of my regional contacts that are in the room as well. And of course to the Brisbane Business Hub, who's allowed me the opportunity to talk to you this morning. I am here on behalf of TAFE Queensland this morning, and I do a lot of work with TAFE Queensland, working with businesses through their programs. I do a lot of work here in Brisbane and regionally as well. And what I'm going to do is get Kate to send everyone out that registered today some information on some of those programs that we run, because they can be really beneficial of you taking a good look at your business. We cover off on things like this around psychology and marketing, but we also look at other critical business areas such as, you know, project management, finance, operations, more into marketing, sales, customer service, all those different areas. So I will send that information out, and if there's an opportunity to work with your business on some of those areas, I I would love the opportunity to do that. Now, I will just go to the Q&A. I can see probably a few of you are taking off because you've got life. Alicia has asked, will the slideshow be emailed? I don't see why not. I'm more than happy to share this slideshow with you. So I suppose I can converse with Kate, and we can just take down your name, Alicia, and make sure that we get that to you. Okay, so that's also, I was just looking at the chat box there. So that's all from me. Thank you so much for your time, and hopefully we'll catch up with you again at some point in the future. So thanks again.